All right, this is Coach Sigler, and this is Owen. He's occupied with this phone. There we go. You'll probably hear him throughout this, but that's okay, because I can't be here tomorrow, so I've got to do what I promised I'd do. Let's finish up your lecture from the day. So I'm going to put Owen here. You may see him again, that's okay. Now, all right, we started chapter 12, section 3, and that is the war in Europe. We had just finished talking about what was going on in Japan and the Pacific and what the United States did over there. Remember, we're fighting a two-front war, and we talked about that earlier today when we talked about halting the Germans. Just quick review. We're fighting a two-front war. We're fighting war in both the United States. We're fighting war in Atlantic and the Pacific at the same time. We did Pacific front last week. Now, remember, Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of Great Britain, he did not think that the United States troops were ready for the Germans. The Germans were too strong, they were too battle-tested. And so, remember, we wanted to put our men on the periphery of the German Empire at this time, which is here in Africa and in all in Europe. So remember, the battle plan was to put our men here and invade through Morocco, go through Algeria and Tunisia, and then into Sicily, which is this island here. It's not really large, that's okay. Now, thank you, Owen, for your disruptions. Now, remember this was FDR and Churchill, all right? We talked about the Battle of North Africa. We talked about the United States going in and fighting the Germans in Algeria, Morocco. Remember the British fought in Egypt. And we had the Battle of El Alamein, which was the British tank general Bernard Montgomery. He was fighting against Erwin Rommel, the tank expert, the Desert Fox. And remember that the British especially wanted Egypt, which is here because they wanted the Suez Canal, to cut off on the distance of this trip around Africa by about 5,000 miles. Remember, here is Montgomery, here's Rommel, and then we looked at the tank formations and talked a little bit about that today. Here are some pictures from the desert fighting, okay, in the Battle of North Africa. Remember, American troops were commanded by Dwight D. Eisenhower. And we talked about when the Americans first fought the Germans. Hey, buddy. Yeah. All right. Why don't you come here? Or be quiet. There we go. That's good. Now, remember we talked about the United States. We were fighting the Germans in Tunisia, and they first fought the Germans at the Battle of Castleman Pass. We got beat pretty bad. We had 7,000 casualties, and we lost about 200 tanks against the Germans.
Oh, Mama.
Remember, Eisenhower fired that general, put George Patton in charge. George Patton was able to push the Germans back. In mid-May of '43, the German troops surrendered in North Africa, which gave us North Africa. Remember, here is Dwight D. Eisenhower. Give us some orders. We also looked at this. This is the map of North Africa here, and our goal was to go through here, Tunisia. We fought the Germans at Castleman Pass, and then from there on, we drive them out, and our next goal is Sicily. And it just occurred to me that Sicily is badly misspelled in this map, and I did not know that until just now. But that wasn't me. Let's blame dyslexia. Now, here are pictures of the marching through the desert. These are American troops going through Tunisia. Here's another map that I should have took out, but it's in there, so deal with it. Who is this guy? This is to my wife who is videoing. Who is this? Do you know? Take a guess. You can talk. Who do you think it is?
I don't know.
You don't know. It's the guy on the book I'm reading. Who is that?
General Patton?
General George Patton. That is correct. And you were ever so beautiful for saying that correctly and being put on the spot. We talked about the Battle of the Atlantic just very quickly. When Germany declared war on the U.S., they're putting their submarines in the Atlantic. Our cargo ships were targeted due to the glows of the city at night. And so to protect our ships, citizens they started doing blackouts, put up blackout curtains. And remember, if they drove at night, they did so without any lights. With all the losses that we had by the Germans, our Navy set up a convoy system, just like in World War I. Yeah. And we looked at some pictures of the convoy today. Here are some blackout curtains. Here are some motivational posters that motivated nobody. And Battle of Atlantic. We lost 1.2 million tons of shipping in the Battle of the Atlantic, but at the same time, we were able to produce 1.1 million tons of shipping and replace what we were losing. But at the same time, our airplanes and our warships were armed with new technology such as radar and sonar. We were able to locate the German submarines. And here's another convoy. We talked about the Battle of Stalingrad. I'm not going to go into as much detail as I did today, but the Battle of Stalingrad, remember Hitler wanted to go into the Soviet Union. He wanted to take out the oil fields of Russia. He wanted to take the factories, the farmlands. If he could get that stuff, remember, Soviet Union is communist. They depend on those things from the government. If they don't have them, they can't wage war. And also, Stalingrad was the junction of the railroads in the Volga River. Remember, Stalingrad is no longer Stalingrad today. It's called Volgograd, named after the river. After the death of Stalin, they changed it. We looked at a map today, and as you can see here, here's Europe, and if you look here, this is Russia, and this was German movements into Russia. Here is Stalingrad on the Volga River. They wanted to get Stalingrad because if they got Stalingrad, they'd be able to, again, cut those oil fields off, take the railroads, control the river, and that's going to really hurt the Russians if they can get it. Don't want to go into too much gory detail, especially what I did today, but at the same time, September 42, the Germans enter Stalingrad. Remember, Stalin ordered the Soviets to hold the city. Any retreat from the Soviets resulted in their deaths from their own officers. The Germans fought house to house. Thousands of soldiers were killed in this. But what really hurt the Germans was the brutal Russian winter. 500,000 Germans go into Stalingrad. 250 are alive when Stalingrad is blockaded in November of 42. In February of 43, Germans surrender. 91,000 go to the Soviet prison camps, but only 5,000 survive. So 5,000 out of 500,000 invading troops in Stalingrad survive. This is a turning point in Stalingrad because after Stalingrad, the Germans are no longer on the offensive. They are on the defensive, and they're headed back to Germany. We looked at this picture of some blown out buildings. Here are some Americans. No, I'm sorry. This is German soldiers going into Stalingrad. Excuse me. These are Russian soldiers on the defense of Stalingrad. Another picture of that. And here's what we got to today. Striking Germany and Italy. Remember, we have to land men on the beaches, okay? When we're going to go into these places, we have to put a boat up. The guys have to get out. They have to go up the beach. We showed this was possible in North Africa. And so we're wanting to do this in Europe, and we don't know where to go. So in 43, in January, FDR and Churchill meet at the Casablanca Conference, and they agree to step up their bombing against Germany. Their goal in this was to destroy the German military, their economic system, and their industrial power, and hurt the morale of the German people. And they also agreed to attack the island of Sicily, which Churchill called the soft underbelly, the weak part. If you go into Italy and you invade and you take it over, the Italians will quit. Here's a picture of FDR, Churchill, military advisors. Here's our map, and just to show you what I'm talking about, this is the island of Sicily. This is the island of Sardinia. This is Italy, up the boot right here, and we wanted to go into Europe. And that should not pop up. Now, here's what we want right here. We're in Tunisia, okay? We wanted to go into Sicily, but we don't want the Germans to know that we're going to Sicily. So what we do is we try to make it look like we're going to Sardinia. We get the British. This is in your book, in your notes. This is a good story. The British take a dead British soldier, and what they do is they put him in an officer's uniform, and they pump water into his lungs to make it look like he died from drowning. He actually died of pneumonia. And what they do is they put him in the ocean, right here in the sea. Daddy. The Germans find him. They find his briefcase that is handcuffed to his wrist, and they examine the briefcase, and they see in the briefcase that he has battle plans for the Americans and the British to go to Sardinia. Fake battle plans. So what the British do and what the Americans do is as they prepare for here, the Germans think they're coming here. The Germans come to Sardinia. They put all their stuff there, anticipate an attack, and then we go right into Sicily. That one soldier was quoted from Churchill as saying that guy did more good in his life after he was dead than he did alive. Sounds like a lot of y'all. Strategic bombing. Britain's Royal Air Force dropped an average of 2,300 tons of explosives on Germany every 3 months, and the U.S. hit with 1,500 as well. But from January of 43 to May 45, both the RAF and the American Air Force, we dropped 53,000 tons of explosives on Germany every month. We upped the bombing from about 4,000 tons to 53,000 tons a month. Now, this bombing did not destroy Germany's economy. It did not undermine their morale, but it did hurt them in the oil shortage that they already were having, and it wrecked the railroads. And it did them so much damage that they were not able to replace the airplanes that they were trying to make once they were shot down. And we were able to have control over the air in Normandy. This is a picture from some of the American planes dropping bombs on Germany during the strategic bombing, and this is a British plane dropping bombs. Eisenhower commanded the invasion of Sicily. General Patton and the British General Bernard Montgomery, they headed the ground forces. July 10th, 43, bad weather. All our supplies and our artillery had to be driven to shore by the amphibious truck, the Amtrak that we talked about in the Battle of Coral Sea, I believe, in the Pacific. Now, U.S. tanks were able to capture most of the western half of Sicily. Patton's troops headed east. Britain attacked from the south. We're getting it from several different ways. But the Germans eventually evacuated Sicily. Once the Allies got into Sicily, here, this is an enlarged map, and here you can see, this is Patton, his movements, this is General Omar Bradley, this is Montgomery. We're hitting Sicily from several different spots to go to Italy here. Once Sicily was invaded, there was a crisis in the Italian government. King Victor Emmanuel, he had Mussolini arrested. He blamed him for the invasion, and he started negotiating a surrender with the Allies. Now, can the king do that? Yes, he can, because he was in charge. He just put Mussolini in charge of running the government, but the king is supreme, so he had Mussolini removed. This is another picture, and then you can see the movements after Sicily. Here's Sicily, the hit, and then where we went into 3 different spots in Italy. You don't want to concentrate all your men in one spot, because if it doesn't succeed, then those guys are stopped. But if you come in from different angles, it spreads the enemy out. Here's some explosions at Sicily. And here's the landing of some American troops at Sicily. After Italy surrenders, Hitler doesn't like this, and what he does is he sends German stormtroopers into the northern part of Italy, and also into Rome, and they go, and this is actually interesting. Mussolini, my kid's tearing up my living room, but that's okay. Mussolini is in a mountain jail, and the stormtroopers go in and break in, kidnap Mussolini, and leave with him. Then they restore him to power. Now, the Germans go into Italy. They take the fortified town of Cassino, where the terrain was very steep and very rocky, while the Allies landed at Anzio, which was behind the German lines. After 5 months, after a 5-month battle at Cassino and Anzio, the Allies were able to break through the German lines. And in May of 44, the Germans retreated. 2 weeks later, Allies captured Rome. Another year of fighting, but this Italian campaign was the bloodiest in the entire war. And there goes a kid. But over 300,000 Allied casualties in this, 300 dead or wounded. Because of this, in 1945, Mussolini was captured by some of his own citizens. They captured him, they shot him and his wife, and they hung their bodies upside down in the town square with meat hooks to punish him. And people would go, and people would spit on him and cuss at him and let him have it. There you go. Now, here are troop movements in Italy. Here you can see, here's Cassino, here's Anzio, and where we went. And here are the bodies. I know you can't see it the way I've got it on this TV, but this is Mussolini here. And people threw rocks at him, they cussed him because they hung the bodies upside down. They wanted their revenge on him, and kind of a cool way to go, I guess. Now, hey, you see this guy? You see him? That's Mussolini. He's dead. Now, after the Italian campaign, FDR wanted to meet with Stalin for the first time before the Allies invaded France. So in late 43, Stalin, Churchill, FDR agreed to meet in Tehran, Iran. There, they reached several agreements. First, Stalin promised that when the Allies invaded France, when we go into France, Stalin would take a full-scale offensive against the Germans and go into the eastern part of Germany. FDR and Stalin also agreed to divide Germany after the war and break it up into pieces so it can never threaten world peace again. You look at what Germany did in World War I and the big brawl they had in World War II, and they wanted to stop that. Stalin also promised once Germany was beaten, the Soviet Union would fight against Japan. Weren't they going to fight against Japan? Good. Now, you pay more attention than any of my kids do. And also, Stalin agreed with FDR that after the war, that they would make an international peacekeeping organization, and that would later be called the United Nations. Here's a picture of Churchill, FDR, Stalin at the Tehran conference. I see him. I want to get it. And here is an old school black and white picture of him before my child breaks everything in my house. I'm up right here. And do you see FDR? You see FDR? Where is he? Point to him. Where's FDR? That's Stalin. No supper for you. Now, Operation Overlord. FDR and Churchill leave Tehran. They go to Cairo, Egypt. They're going to plan the invasion of France. Make Germany fight this two-front war. FDR gets Eisenhower to be the commander of Operation Overlord, which was the Allied invasion of France. Hitler. Are you jumping? Jump. Here. Let everybody see it. Good job. Now, Hitler chose Eisenhower to do this. But Hitler knows that when the Allies invade, they're going to invade in France. So he puts his men, his tanks there. The Germans believed we were going to land at Pas de Calais, which was where the area was where France was closest to Britain. So what we do, we want to fake them out. We put a bunch of dummy equipment there. We put inflatable tanks, inflatable guns. But our real target was on Normandy, on the beaches of Normandy. Right here, I know it's tough to see, but this is an inflatable tank that we put across at Pas de Calais so that the Germans would think that we were going to go there. In the spring of 44, more than 1.4 million soldiers, 12,000 airplanes, 5 million tons of equipment go to England. We want to invade into France, but the invasion had to begin at night because if it was at night, the Germans couldn't see us going across the English Channel. They also had to arrive at low tide so they could see the beach obstacles because the Germans put actual obstacles on the beach where our tanks could not go up. And it had to be at dawn so gunners could see their targets. The paratroopers needed a moonlit night. All of this needed good weather. You couldn't have high waves because the landing craft would get flooded. So with all these requirements, there's just a few days each month. June 6, 1943 was chosen. They called this D-Day, and the D stood for day. It's technically Day, but that's just what they called it. That's not me. But here is a picture of the American landing craft at Normandy. And you can see this door would open out, and they would go down. But see, also you got to keep in mind that the Germans are up here. They're firing at them, so as soon as the door opens up, they're facing an onslaught of ammunition. And here's one of the more famous pictures from this, and you can see, here are some of the anti-tank. I know it's hard to see right here, but you can see some of the anti-tank things the Germans left. These are the Americans leaving the landing craft. I'm almost done, I promise. Know this, the 7,000 ships carrying more than 100,000 soldiers went to Normandy. 23,000 paratroopers were dropped in England, east and west of the beaches. The fighters go off with their ships. They go down the coast. They hit bridges, they hit bunkers and radar sites. There's 5 beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Sword, Juneau. The Utah landing, Americans went there. It went very well. The Germans were weak there. On the eastern flank, the British and Canadian landings went well. And here you can see on this map, here's France. And you can see here the different landings. You got the American one at Utah and Omaha, the British at Gold, the British at Sword, and the Canadians at Juneau. This is the bad one. Omaha was the one where it did not go very well. Very, very high cliffs there. The Germans took the high ground as we landed and went up the beach. The Germans shot at us. There wasn't much we could do. We suffered intense German fire, but slowly but surely we took out the German defenses, took out their obstacles. We lost 2,500 Americans. Or 2,500 Americans were killed or wounded at Omaha. by the end of the day, we were able to make it up. And D-Day was a success. And you can see here, this is Great Britain. And you can see where we went to in France. And you see here, here's Pas-de-Calais. So the Germans thought we were coming here, but we came here. And then here's another map of the invasions from another angle. And here are some of the landings right here. And American troops running up the beach. And this is not part of your notes, but if you want to do this, good D-Day photos here, visit this site that I've written down here, and there's all kinds of pictures you can look at. So with that said, that's the conclusion of chapter 12, section 3. And I'm going to head out. So I need a catchphrase. So with that said, come here. Look at that. We are out.